I actually like working with musicians because they're used to stopping and starting and all that kind of stuff.
We are, we are. That's what we spend our lives doing.
So, alrighty. So we're recording, and welcome. You're my first recording for Lizzie's Bedtime Stories Pride Special. And I'm excited to have you on the show, Jody.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad that I'm number one. It means that, it's all downhill from here.
Oh no. No, you started off so well and then you went all British and melancholy and shit.
it's my dry wit, really, on it.
Yes, it's the maudlin, stab somebody in the side to make them giggle.
Oh, yeah. Well, you saved the best to last, see. So you stick the bad one at the front.
So are you in Wales?
I am. I'm in South Wales.
Okay. I actually, well, kissing cousins. I was in Ireland for a year, and I was in Dublin, and so we weren't too far away when I was there.
You're in Trinity, were you?
Yeah.
Was it Trinity?
Yeah. I went to Trinity for a year.
I visited my family roots from Cork, and
they've got a great jazz festival there.
They do. They have a lot of good jazz around. It's funny, isn't it? The Irish are good at most things that aren't Irish.
Well, it's really funny is that I went to the Cork Jazz Fest when I was there, and we actually we squatted in a apartment above from the apartment one of my friends knew. I guess it was an empty apartment, and so that's where we stayed during the Jazz Fest. We were criminals.
Yeah, it was a good thing the Garda didn't find you.
I know the Garda, but there were so many of us. I think it was almost like the floors were painted with bodies. Everybody was sleeping on the floor.
Oh, bless.
And nothing happened. I have not been arrested in Ireland, so that's good.
I like that you actually just said in Ireland. Said nothing more.
Oh, I haven't been arrested. I've never been arrested.
It was a Freudian slip, look.
Yes, I'm a criminal. You've caught me. So anyway, you wrote this really smashingly wonderful story called Seeing Stars, and I'm actually playing a large part in your reading.
Wow, you've got a starring role.
I do. I have a starring role, and at first when you asked me to read the part of the American, I was just like, I don't know, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I read your story. I'm like, I'll do it, no problem. And now I'm like, I don't have a Southern accent. I'm just American.
It's got to be better than my American accent. That's what you got to think.
Aha. All right. So do you have the page in front of you? You ready to get started?
I do.
All right. So you get started, and I'll kick in at the points where I highlighted in my manuscript.
Okay, I know, but we've got a script.
Yes, we have a script. Posh. Yes.
Look out, Hollywood. Here you come. Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to introduce the title and my name?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. So this is Seeing Stars, and it's by Jody Klaire, which is me. The thudding heartbeat hammered in quavers. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. Hannah could hear nothing above the noise. The empty space between her and the microphone seemed like miles. The presenter smiled at her, ready to hand over her the award. Her bandmates turned to look at her, and she tried to smile, tried to move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The lighting was always so hot, so bright. The sweat dribbled down her chest. Her makeup was itching, her palms drenched. Could she do this? Hannah's stomach lurched even at the thought, that sickening tickle of panic pulsing away inside. It was all down to her now. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. 2 quavers equal to crotchet. 2 crotchets a minim. Basic, simple music theory. Any child would know it, but it circled in her mind. Simple was good. Simple gave her something to hold on to.
Step closer. A camera phone flash. So public. This was too public. It had to be now. Her heart and head told her as much. If she couldn't, she never would. You want to say anything? Alex asked.
Hannah tried to swallow. Her mouth was so dry, Somewhere in her mind she found the irony. She never got stage fright. It was the one place she felt at home. Her throat closed, and she tried to clear the mucus. Alex smiled and held out her hand. Han? Craig called as he carried on one on his constant companion of a smartphone. You got a minute? Hannah tore herself away from doodling riffs on her guitar. Taking it with her, she followed the buzzing babble of Azur's band manager. She wasn't sure whether man was still with them. 3 years and they'd hardly broken even. There's 5, he said, palm over his mouthpiece. In there. Only 5? Hannah looked at the peeling offers poster on the dingy barroom door. That's all? Well, when we're all millionaires and you're playing Wembley, I'll get you more. He pulled out his handkerchief and used it to grip the door handle. Keep your brother from doing the hiring, Craig muttered. Paul was his idea, remember? Nodding, Hannah took a deep breath and headed through to the pokey bar. So they weren't stars yet, but her brother Jason had been a minor success in the classical world as a child. That, and 4 of them were Guildhall alumni. Didn't the elite education stand for anything anymore? Apparently not. Hannah counted only 4 candidates as she tucked her hair behind her ear, and she tried not to discount 2 on appearance alone. They looked mean. They looked like they belonged on a news item about bank robbers. They could be wonderful musicians, she reminded herself. With their ex-bassist Paul gone, they couldn't afford to be picky. I'm Hannah, she said, but her voice sounded raw. Bars were too humid, too sticky with fumes for her vocal cords. How about we start playing and we'll see how it feels? A chorus of grunts came as reply. Craig was crazy if he thought she should be in here alone. Where were the others anyway? Why did she have to do everything? Okay, she said, heading over to the least ripped bar stool she could find. You want to go first? She pointed to the nearest prospect as she rested her fingers on the strings. They would take a while to get used to the humidity. Not perfect. Why don't we start with something simple? 12-bar blues? Bearded bassist number 1 stepped up and hacked something foul from his throat, which he then proceeded to spit into a dirty glass. Hannah's stomach lurched. Start in A, she said, trying to look anywhere but the glass. What fret? He grunted. His voice sounded like he smoked entire chimneys. Hannah dismissed prospects 1, 2, and 3 before they had even made it to the end of the first few bars. They made the blues go from smooth and aching to something so threatening that she swore it would leap from the speaker and demand money from her at any second. Pounding noise was worse than no bass at all, and the men seemed equally as irritated with her style of playing. The 4th prospect's bald head glistened in the dim lighting. His eyes flicked back and forth as he tapped his foot on the sticky bar floor to a beat devoid of any detectable rhythm. From the top? Hannah asked, looking for the missing number 5. He had obviously thought better of it. This guy, however weird, was their last shot at making the showcase. Ready? Hannah waited for a response, but got none, and so she started to play. After a few bars, she stopped when he didn't join in. Are you going to play? Sure. Hannah began again, her boredom getting the better of her and causing her to improvise without realizing. Number 4 still wasn't playing a note. Why aren't you coming in? Number 4 blinked a few times as he looked at her. Me? Who else is in here? She muttered under her breath. You need to come in. But you're looking at me. You don't like people looking at you? He shook his head. It's okay when I got a few inside me, he said. Then I ain't all that bad. A bassist who was stage shy? What would you do in a stadium? Possibly thousands watching you. Number 4 shrugged. I would drink a load more. Then he laughed, revealing big gaps in his tar-coloured teeth. Attractive. Craig? Hannah gave number 4 a polite smile. Craig! Keep your lacy ones on, darling. Craig sauntered in like he was about to perform a ballet, but his floaty manner vanished when he saw the look on Hannah's face. Where did everyone go? He, she said through clenched teeth. is all that is left. She tried not to raise her voice to a level that number 4 would hear. And he doesn't play to an audience unless inebriated. Ah. Rose looked over at the stipend. The race is in 3 days. S made her grip tighten and her guitar strings groan. What do we do? Craig was silent for a moment, his gaze shifting from side to side as he thought. Humour him. What? Craig nodded. He could be a genius. Humour him. He swished off before she could throttle him, and Hannah directed her venomous thoughts with her best glare. How about I close my eyes? The question was sarcastic, her tone sounding far too much like her old singing teacher. Genius. She doubted it. Sure. Hannah shut her eyes and started to play. The faint sound that she heard over it was jarring and out of tune. They were stuffed. No way they could find a bassist in 3 days. That was it. Dream over. Stuffed. Look. Hannah stopped at a bass tone so smooth and delightful to her ears that she shivered with it. It was heavenly. Maybe Craig had been right. Or maybe she'd fallen asleep. Deciding to test number 4's skill level, she began to shift keys. Mr. Shy not only followed, but added a perfect bass run that made Hannah smile at the sound. Not too heavy, not too showy, just enough to accentuate the rhythmic feel. Hannah started to embellish, the changes coming more frequently, licks and runs, pauses and rhythm changes as the bass followed. He was so astute that he seemed to read her mind, and a few times preempting her switch and dynamic before she had. She realized she was humming, then singing, over the top and losing herself in a sultry blues number. A low, smooth harmony filled her ears, and she knew that she was either hallucinating or it was a dream, because Mr. Shy's voice was gloriously female. Hannah opened her eyes, and her startled, "Oh," made the woman standing opposite her smile.
Howdy.
Hannah frowned. Where had number 4 gone? Or had he transformed? That was some party trick. How? A pair of dark eyebrows raised in response. You aren't him. Hannah shook her head at her own stupid question.
You mean Jimmy? The woman asked. Her accent was hypnotizing as her music, slow, deep, like liquid chocolate. It soothed her ears until she shivered again, and Hannah was coughing.
Yes, she blurted. He left? The woman's laugh made Hannah's stomach wriggle, and she giggled like an idiot.
Jimmy is as dumb as a bag of hammers, she said. Guy wanted you to shut your eyes so he could run.
Are you number 5? Hannah asked. Oh, it was official. She was an imbecile. I mean, are you here for the audition?
Uh-huh, came the reply. Thought my bass might have given me away.
Where did you go? Hannah was too overawed by the woman to be irritated, but she had left the bar without a word.
They got pie next door, the woman answered with a smile. And if there's one thing I love, it's pie.
Hannah couldn't help but smile with the woman as she gazed off into some memory of pastry and fruit. You risked not being here for dessert?
Not just any dessert, peach pie with ice cream, the woman said. Besides, I saw what the coyote dragged in.
When can you start? Hannah knew that she should talk to the others, consult like they always did, but there was no way they would find another bassist like this one.
I got no plans.
Hannah felt her stress burst into excitement. She wanted to get up and dance around. Not that she ever would. Decorum. The woman was perfect in style for them. She looked great. Shaggy black hair, matching dark eyebrows. Definitely Greek in heritage, Hannah thought, or at least Mediterranean. And Hannah was staring again. I'm Hannah. What's your name?
The woman smiled and held out her hand. Name's Alex.
Thud, thud. Thud, thud. A flat has 4 flats. B, E, A, and D. Come on. Breathe through it. Slowly. So many people should have said something before. Why now, Han? What is it with you and timing? Breathe.
Han, Alex's voice close to her ear made Hannah turn to meet blue eyes. Whatever you decide, I'm right here.
Alex, she'd always been there, always been ready to back her up. I can't do this. Hannah buried her head in her hands. The song sounded wrong. The only song they had was one of Paul's dirge-like laments. What else do we have? Jason asked. His keyboard had plodded out the same terrible song for hours. Her older brother was as bored as she was. Rach? She asked. The flick of a red dreadlock sent the cymbal crashing to the ground, making Hannah's already pounding headache worse. What about you, Louis? She asked the rhythm guitarist, who was too busy laughing at Rachel to hear her. Rach! Hannah's fraught nerves sprayed further. What do you want me to say? Rach said, while stretching to relieve the crash. Anything beats playing Paul's crap. Louis? Louis dodged a flying drumstick and nodded. Whatever you think is best, Han. Great. It was always her. Turning to Alex, who had been chuckling at Louis and Rachel's sparring session, Hannah cleared her throat. Why the woman always made her feel like a dumb teenager she didn't know. She was 26. She was an adult. Alex was a bassist and she was the band leader, so why did she feel like she was addressing an idol who had adorned her walls?
Why don't you try writing something? Alex suggested.
Hannah assumed that Alex was joking. She'd only been with the band 2 days, and Hannah wasn't sure what constituted teasing yet. As in, compose?
Sure thing, Alex said. I heard you humming a melody earlier. How about that one?
Hannah studied the scratch plate on a guitar. Alex had heard her singing to herself.
Now how'd it go? Alex mumbled and started to pick out the same tune with her voice before adding the bass line underneath. Jason joined in, his embellishment adding a touch of sparkle to the looping phrase, and Rachel grinned over at Louis, and the pair began to play in unison.
Try a harmony over it, Han, Jason suggested, and she found the frets with her fingers, adding licks and lead sections.
You had words too, right? Alex's energy was contagious. Much was clear. When she was in the band room, her easy confidence encouraged the others. She was older than them, and so self-assured that it was hard to deny her. Hannah's mouth opened and started to sing.
Number 1 in 38 countries. Craig was so animated that Hannah thought he may hit the ceiling with all the bouncing up and down. The champagne bottle in his hand was definitely going to fizz. Who'd have thought it? He struggled with the cork. I mean Hannah, our little Hannah Young, composing a hit record. Not just me, Hannah objected. We all took part. It had been her wish that the whole band were listed as composers. All she'd done was just hum a tune to herself. They had done the rest. Alex, darling, Craig continued, ignoring Hannah, get off the phone with your bit of stuff and get over here. He shook the still cork bottle at her. Party time. Hannah looked over at Alex as she finished up her call. They'd been living in each other's pockets for 6 months, and as she knew as little as much about the woman as she did the day they met. Long-distance telephone calls were frequent, and if Craig's gaydar was anything to go by, it was to a woman. Hannah had wanted to ask. Alex was a mystery to her and to them all. Jason, she knew better than she wanted to at times. She could read her brother's mood just by the way he played up his warm-up scales. Rachel, well, they'd been friends since the first year of Guildhall. She was earthy, spiritual. The dreadlocked hair had been ever present since those days. She was cool and unflappable to the point that Hannah wanted to throw something at her sometimes. Rachel was a creature of habit when it came to her kit, always set up the same way, same order, and she always had odd socks on for a performance. Louis was just as relaxed in character. He could have been a football star. He could have been on Arsenal's books until an accident had robbed him of his childhood dream. Hannah was thankful that he'd sought solace in music. Azor wouldn't be the band it was without his beaming smile, his Caribbean roots, braided dyed blonde hair and designer fluff on his chin. He was the essence of cool. Their calm personalities were the perfect offset to Hannah and Jason's intensity. And Alex? She was still like a stranger in so many ways, but when she played, When they were on stage, she seemed to throw off the barriers and meld with them effortlessly. Off stage, Hannah had only prized a few snippets from her, and she'd learned that Alex did have semi-Greek roots. She'd been born in Nicosia in Cyprus, but was now a fully-fledged American. Alex had a Maltese cross tattooed on the underside of her right wrist. She liked beer, and had an almost religious obsession with pie. Other than that, Hannah didn't even know her age.
Twist the bottle, Alex told Craig, rescuing the champagne from him. To the album.
Heartbeat. 1, 2. Rest. 1, 2. Like Rachel's bass drum. It's so hot. Too hot. No air. Come on, Han. Breathe. You can do this. You spent enough time thinking about it. You need to do this. I can't. I can't. Alex?
I'm here.
A strong hand on the base of her back made Hannah close her eyes. Alex knew. She always knew.
Han, what's wrong? Alex had some kind of low-cut vest on and lower-slung jeans. Her smile was so infectious that Hannah felt lifted despite her mood.
I don't know what to write. There. She'd said it out loud. It should be to Jason. It was always to Jason she would talk about these things, but she couldn't. She didn't want to let him and them down.
How many you got? Alex asked.
Hannah looked down at the page she'd been using to add track titles to and felt tears threatening to spill over. None?
Alex dropped down beside her and patted her knee. Want a jam? She asked. Maybe that will grease the brain wheels.
God, I love you. Hannah flopped against a strong shoulder.
Don't tell Sarah that, Alex said through her chuckling. Or Taylor.
Hannah sighed. I think he's why I can't write.
A strong arm draped around her and squeezed. Thought the throes of new love was supposed to inspire.
Me too. She was happy enough. It was pleasant being with him. He was all right, and he understood the industry. The added bonus was that Alex's Sarah stopped shooting daggers at her every time she and Alex so much as looked at each other. She knows that I love you to pieces, Hannah said. Tough.
Alex laughed. Her deep laugh rippled through Hannah like electricity. Tough? That's the biggest cuss word you can come up with?
You know I don't swear, Hannah said. Why was it such a teasing point she didn't understand?
Come on, try it.
Hannah shook her head. Swearing sounded ridiculous in her plum-of-the-mouth accent, as Craig called it.
Come on, hit me, Alex said, leaning back, motioning her chin along with her fingers. Right here, best shot.
I don't possess the ability.
Alex wasn't letting up and thumbed in the direction of the boys. Taylor was locked in combat with Louie and Jason on the Xbox. You ever a jackass? She asked. Leave the toilet seat up?
Hannah folded her arms. He's perfectly lovely, thank you.
Yeah, Alex said. No love is that blind. That little stuff doesn't bug. Alex said. Love is not that blind. That little stuff doesn't bug you sometimes.
Hannah tried to shush Alex as she went to call Taylor. Cut it out, will you?
Then insult him already, Alex said. Her blue eyes twinkled, considering her roots would normally guarantee that she have brown eyes. Alex's were nearly the color of the band's name. Quit gawping at me and cuss at him already.
Fine, Hannah said. Sometimes he's a pain in the neck.
The ass, Alex corrected.
Same thing, Hannah said.
It's not.
Is too.
You gotta loosen up or we're never gonna get these songs flowing from you. Alex grinned and made Hannah tense. Oh, what was she up to now? Cuss him out or I'll go beat at him. I'll go beat him at that dumb game that he loves so much.
You wouldn't. They both knew that if Taylor was beaten by Alex again, he would sulk all night. It would be unbearable.
Say it.
Arse, Hannah said. Taylor is an arse. Her voice protracted further than she'd intended, and 3 faces turned to look at her, and a howling Alex. C major has no sharps or flats. B to C and E to F are the semitones. Alex's hand was warm on her back as Hannah stepped forward to the mic. It was time. She couldn't just run or hide. She had to say something. Time to tell the truth. Oh, what was the truth? "Thank you for this," she began, and took the cold, heavy award. How did she start? Where did she start? Alex had been crying for goodness knows how long when Hannah got to her. Dark circles, a red nose, and hair more unruly than normal told her that Alex had found out a lot earlier than she had.
19 years, Alex said, her eyes locked on the newspaper in front of her. 19 years, and all I am to her is another story.
The media had been on the hunt. The feeding frenzy had been merciless. Alex's sexuality, the sordid account that Sarah had written for her newspaper, had been plastered over every outlet there was. It wasn't as though Alex had chosen to hide anything. She hadn't shouted it out to the world, but it should hardly be a surprise, with opinions of most being so what these days. Alex really shouldn't have been more than a footnote. Hannah sat on the porch step beside Alex. The Kentucky ranch was at least isolated enough that not even a long lens could get a shot of them. Why did she do it?
Alex threw the paper on the floor. Because I caught her with a woman she had picked up. Alex's hands shook as she gripped her knees. I funded her education. I shut my mouth because I didn't want it affecting her career. She turned, blue eyes rippling with pain. I'm a fool. A stupid damn fool.
You're a sweet fool, though, Hannah said. She painted you as some kind of maniac who ravished our groupies. She shook her head even at the thought. Alex's clubhouse girls had been with them since the beginning. More domesticated, happy ladies you could never wish to meet. They had formed a big business out of Alex and Azure merchandise, and they took the photos, they controlled the blogs and forums. It jarred that the women now had to field questions from those around them, and perhaps wives and girlfriends, all because of Sarah's lies. I've seen film stars drooling over you, Hannah said, and you've never been more than polite to them.
At least you know that.
I do, and so do the others. Alex nodded, a tear dribbling its way down her nose. Hannah wanted to hug her or comfort her, but she didn't know how to make the situation better. All she could do was sit there aching for her heartbroken friend.
She says she never even loved me, Alex whispered.
Hannah couldn't make that hurt vanish, but she wished that she could. Well, she said, staring out at the beautiful ranch, Sarah is a jackass. A rumble of laughter from Alex told her that somehow, in some small way, she had made a difference. I've never been a person to make public announcements, Hannah said. Her voice sounded like a vibrato on triple time, and she swore if Alex took her hand away she'd faint. And I know what I have to say may not be what you expect. Hannah hurried in from her car. The heavens had unleashed their watery fury on London, and it reflected her mood. Everything was so out of perspective. 3 platinum albums, 10 years of tours and success couldn't protect her nephew getting crippled in a hit and run. She shook off the coat in her hallway and clenched her jaw when she spotted a pair of trainers and a bag in the middle. Taylor? Hanging her coat on the hook, she picked up his from the floor where he'd thrown it. It was his way of protesting why they didn't live together. To her, it emphasized just why they didn't. Taylor!
Hannah checked her phone messages and smiled as Alex's name popped up. Hey, hope little Jason Jr. is doing okay. Give me a call. Hug, hug.
Hannah reread the messages a few times and stroked her thumb over the screen. Alex was such a different woman with Sarah long gone. So much more alive. So much more open. Hannah had craved to know her secrets, and Alex had gladly shared the grim truths. Her parents leaving her at the side of the road. Sarah's family taking her in, and never letting her forget it. First steps today. Doctors think it's promising. Miss you. Wish you were here. Kiss, kiss. Hannah frowned at the message and deleted from miss you onwards. Alex didn't need to hear her melancholy thoughts. It wasn't her fault that the idiot had nearly killed her nephew, and they still hadn't found him. It wasn't Alex's fault that the subsequent world tour had been cancelled as Jason stayed home to be with his family. It had been the absence from Alex that had really put the bleakness in her mood. She'd spent years with them all in a tight-knit group, and Jason, Craig, Rachel and Louis all lived miles only from her house in Kensington. But Alex lived on her ranch in Kentucky. Prime, their record label, had also offered Hannah her own tour, her own album, and her own multi-million-pound contract. She needed to talk it over with Alex and with Craig. "Baby?" Taylor's voice jarred her back to the present, and she stomped through to the living room, where she stopped and stared, dumbstruck at the room around her. He'd covered the whole place in candles and rose petals. "Our anniversary is next week," Hannah protested. Taylor sauntered over to her and handed her a glass of red wine. "Can't I treat you?" There went the nice hot bubble bath, the good book, and the quick call with Alex, and some much-needed sleep. He was hunting for romance, and she wanted anything but. "It's your favourite," he said, as she looked down at the wine. "I've something for you." "Oh Lord, that couldn't be good." "Taylor," he shoved the box into her hand. "Open it." Every part of her told her not to. No way, there was only one place this conversation was headed, and she was watching helpless. Maybe it was just a necklace. Maybe she was just leaping to conclusions. "Will you marry me?" he asked, dropping to one knee. No leaping, spot on, oh balls. Her blurted laughter must have made him think that she was accepting, and it was only when she took a step back that his smile faded. "It's her, isn't it?" Hannah frowned. "Her who?" Taylor got to his feet and rammed the ring box into his jeans. "Nothing I do competes, Han." He rubbed a hand over his double chin. "Everyone said I'm wasting my time, that you are..." He shook his head. "I just didn't want to see." "See what?" Hannah heard the icy tone in her voice and wondered when she'd become so impatient. "Alex," Taylor snapped. "You and her." He stomped out into the hall as she followed him, and her defensive response surprised even her. "This has nothing to do with Alex," she snapped. "My nephew is in the hospital and you shoved this in my face. I have things on my mind." "You think I don't care?" Taylor said. "Not once have you asked me to come with you. Your mom had to tell me what happened in the first place." Hannah couldn't argue with his point, but she'd apologized, and she wasn't thinking at the time. "I told you I was sorry." "So am I," Taylor said. "How am I going to tell people?" Hannah shook her head. Some part of her had thought that they would continue their relationship after Taylor had calmed down, until his words. "I'll stay quiet," she said. "No one needs to know anything publicly from me until we start back again." Taylor rolled his eyes. "I meant my mom, our friends, my friends." He picked up his coat off the hook. "I don't care about the media." Years of being safe, of managing the press due to their relationship, managing the media speculation over where their future was headed, and not to mention those lurking to bring Azure down after Alex's ex and her venom. She'd gotten so cold to him, so caught up in everything else, that he barely existed. "You don't even want to cry, do you?" he asked. Taylor was crying, something she'd never seen him do. She thought that she'd loved him, but her own lack of empathy when he needed her to show him a softer side told them both how shallow that love really was. 8 years, Han, and you got nothing for me?" Hannah could do nothing but shake her head and watch him walk out of the door. After a moment she closed the door properly, cleaned the mud off the hall floor, and wondered how long it would take her to hoover up the petals she was allergic to and pour out the wine that she detested. "So much has happened," Hannah said, gripping the podium in one hand and the award in the other. "Our priorities are called into question when things happen to those you love." She could see Jason fidget out of the corner of her eye. Alex's hand kept its vigil, and she took a deep breath. No backing out now. "Are you pregnant or something?" Craig asked as he refilled his martini. "It's Alex's 40th, darling, and you haven't touched a drop." "Do you think I'm gay?" Hannah asked. Expecting Craig to spray his martini across the room with surprise, she found herself somewhat disappointed by his calm. "Honey, that's an odd question." "Please." Her voice sounded small and raspy. "This is about Taylor, isn't it?" he asked. "You know he is as jealous as we split up." Craig raised his eyebrows. Oh? 4 months ago. Oh. Hannah watched him sip his drink. This is about me. You have senses about these things. Craig waved it away. What is gay anyway, he said. Unless you're a label, people just want to. Hannah walked over to him and put her hand over his mouth. What does your gaydar say about me? Craig pulled her hand away and kissed it. I think you're busy with your career, he said. You never seemed overly into Taylor, but then, who are you ever like that with? Taylor said Alex. Well, Taylor was an idiot. Hannah raised her eyebrows. She'd thought everyone liked him. Clearly she was wrong. Oh, his star is on the wane, Craig said. He's more wooden than most trees. Hannah hated to think of the reality of Taylor's situation. For nearly 2 years he hadn't worked. How do you know when it's love, not friendship? Hannah had spent the last few months pondering the question. Taylor's accusation that she loved Alex had rolled around in her mind. She'd not told a soul what he said, or about their breakup. Love is selfless, Craig said. Love is knowing what's best for someone's happiness and doing it, even if it's not what's best for you. So, no world-stopping eye contact or magic? Craig smiled. In the beginning, maybe, but real love, like Dan and I, he said. Love is standing in the freezing cold at 4 a.m. waiting for the dog to pee so he doesn't have to. Hannah couldn't help but laugh. This hallmark right there. Craig waved it away. If you can't make the one you love happy, do you love them enough to walk away? Like leave the band? You have a glittering deal waiting for you, he said. It's not like there will be a better time. Hannah looked over at Alex, singing with Jason on the karaoke in the living room. What about the others? Honey, they have been riding your wave since college, he said, and Alex will take care of them. Hugging herself from the sudden chill that sent through her, she tried not to give in to the ache in her chest. You don't think I'm right for her? Craig touched his fingers to his cheek. You're Hannah Young, he said. You're right for everyone. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed gorgeousness. He smiled when Hannah frowned at him. Look, Han, you saw what being with Sarah did to her. You think I would do that? Her anger bubbled even at the thought. I think you would have trouble being open about it. Would you choose her over your career? He lowered his voice. Because that's really what you're risking here, Han. Those magazines who pay you for your picture are not going to find you so appealing. The world has changed, but the media still has a way to go. Hannah winced at the thought of the barbs directed at Alex being thrown her way. Alex was strong. She was confident. She could deal with it. But Hannah? What if Craig was right and her career nosedived? Solo deals are a big thing, Hannah mumbled. And she may not love me anyway. Looking over at Alex as she waved from the living room, Hannah heard Craig agree. But if you really love her, that wouldn't change a thing. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. Why can't I just do this? It's not like the others aren't expecting it. Alex's hand remained there. The mic zoomed in and out of focus, and she wiped her dripping hands on her trousers.
Follow your heart, Han, Alex whispered. Han, Alex said, I know something is up, so spill it.
Hannah feigned a smile. I'm fine.
Alex barred her exit with her arm. You've got offered a solo deal. It sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Hannah couldn't even bear to look into Alex's eyes. Alex had every right to be angry and to demand why she hadn't been informed. She'd done none of those things. Steadfast, loyal, and she always wanted what was best for Hannah. Alex loved her enough, in whatever context, not to stand in her way. There was never a complaint when Hannah was too busy composing. In fact, Alex encouraged her.
Han, whatever you decide, Alex said, I'm right here. You still got me.
Thud, thud. All day locked in her mind, Hannah wasn't sure if the memories had spilled from her lips in the silence as she stood staring into the sea of cameras and people, peers, fans. She'd been attracted to Alex, that much she could admit. That was no problem. Alex was gorgeous. The matte black base hanging around tanned, strong shoulders was enough to make anybody wobbly. Friendship was there too. They'd scaled heights that only the band could ever understand. Long tours, months in studios, press and PR, photo shoots, music videos, only Alex and the others knew how lonely that got. How hard. Alex had scarred. Sarah had scarred Alex, and Hannah had been there to pick up the pieces. She loved that. She loved being that close to her. Was it enough? Did she love her enough to lose her career? This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, she said. But I need to tell you all something. I need to explain. Alex's thumb smoothed circles on her back, and Hannah steadied herself. You see, I love someone, she said. I am in love with someone who needs to know. Alex's hand stilled. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. Loving someone is sometimes hard. Loving them enough to walk away is harder. Hannah turned to Alex, the blue eyes searching hers, the black eyebrows furrowed. But sometimes loving someone gives you the courage to try. Putting the award down and taking Alex's hand, she couldn't hear anything over the hammering heart. No turning back now. I love you, Alex. Alex blinked at her a few times. I may not be the best thing for you, and you may not love me the same way, but Alex sucked in the shallow breaths. This was so hard. I want it on record, and I want it stated, that I love you anyway.
Alex cocked her head to the side. You aren't sure if I love you? Alex laughed. Who doesn't love Hannah Young?
Hannah heard applause somewhere, and she registered clapping, the band members whooping, and Craig hugging Dan in the wings. Hannah squeezed Alex's hand. I mean it, she said. I really do love you.
Alex smiled and made Hannah's stomach wriggle as she leaned in close. I love you, even more than pie.
Yay!
We made it to the end of the recording. For those of you who are listening to the beautiful, clean version of this story, she and I have had so many stops and starts. It was a comedy of errors, and it's so funny because you were talking in the story about how you sound funny if you try to curse.
Yeah.
You do sound funny when you try to curse.
Did I see? I do. I'm not good at. I don't swear.
You see. Here's the thing. I love swearing. You know.
I can swear in Welsh pretty well.
Like, you know, fuck, bitch, cunt, whatever. It's like I can throw those shit out left and right. But you'd sound too proper if you said fuck.
But the thing is, I don't sound like that normally. When I start reading, I just become an English graduate or something. I don't know.
You were just so proper in your love of Alex.
She obviously makes me feel, prim and proper.
Uh-huh.
I was invoking Hannah. That was it. That was honestly, it was my acting skills.
Yes, that was phenomenal. And I want to thank you for being the very first and most calamitous recording, I'm sure, for Lizzie's Bedtime Stories Pride Special.
Thank you very much for having me, and please let someone be worse.